Well, hello and welcome to this session. What we're going to talk about is how we actually derive risk treatments for our particular risk. Now, one of the things that I see in risk plans all over the place is, well, all high-end risks are to be treated unless it's not cost-effective to do so. Medium risks may not be treated, and lows, we'll just park those and keep monitoring and reviewing. But what we need to understand is that not every risk has to have a treatment allocated to it. What we should be doing is actually asking a series of questions once we've identified the risk. Now, the first question that we ask is, can I avoid the risk altogether by not undertaking the activity? And therefore, obviously, avoiding the likelihood of having those consequences. Now, the reality is there are very, very few things, particularly at a bureaucratic or government department, or whether it be local government, state government, even a company. The reality is that it's not very often that you've got the ability to avoid that risk by not doing the activity. The next question that I like to ask is, can I reduce the likelihood of the risk occurring by strengthening or ensuring the effectiveness of the controls that I've currently got in place? Now, what you will find if you go to coronial inquiries and court cases and audits and so forth, what you will find is that when something happens, it is very rarely because of a lack of or an absence of controls. More often than not, it is actually because there were controls in place and they failed. So when we're doing our risk analysis and the likelihood of that particular risk, we ask ourselves, of course, and we've spoken about this a number of times, how effective are those current controls? So the question I have is, why would you go and put more treatments in place if, in the first place, what we do is strengthen the control environment that we've got already? Now, if you identify those controls and you believe and you've measured the effectiveness of those and you still think that risk is above a target level for risk, then you can ask yourself the question, can I reduce the risk or the likelihood of the risk by adding more treatments? Now, as I've said, we really need to be careful about adding more treatments because ultimately they become additional controls that you have to put resources against, that you have to measure the effectiveness of. And the difficulty with that is then we may get a situation where we're over-controlled and we put bureaucracy which actually stifles innovation. And so, first and foremost, can I avoid it? Secondly, can I reduce the likelihood by strengthening the controls? Or can I reduce the likelihood by adding new treatments if needed? Now, the third thing that we address with the fourth question we ask is, can I actually reduce the consequence if that event does occur? And we could do that through strategies such as a business continuity plan, our disaster recovery plans, insurance, and the like. But of course, what we need to focus on first is trying to stop the event happening in the first place. If we are enacting a business continuity plan or disaster recovery plan, that means that the event has already occurred and we're starting to see those consequences. And obviously, as an organization, we want to try and avoid that as much as possible. So the reality is, focus a lot more on the likelihood and focus on those current controls first. I actually like to do it as a step process. First thing, make sure that our control environment is effective and that we can demonstrate its effectiveness, not just sit in a workshop and say, well, yep, that control's effective because nothing's happened. I think I've said it before that an absence of incident does not mean that your control is effective. Often it means that you've just been lucky. So can I strengthen the control environment? Do that first. And then, after you have brought it up to a level of effectiveness, then maybe consider looking to see if the risk needs to be brought down any further, and then think about treatments. But you don't have to go into a workshop one day and come out on that same day with a whole list of treatments. I think as a whole, we're trying to do risk management too quickly. A lot of these risks are very, very complex, and they need to identify, or you need to identify not only the controls you've got in place and their effectiveness, but the stakeholder involvement, what their expectations are, and start to understand how that risk is going to be managed as a system. Well, that's all I've got for this particular topic. As always, let's be careful out there.